When you operate in an environment that is feedback driven, you're constantly going to be surfacing small things that you can tweak for improvement. When you're not operating in a feedback safety environment, it often takes a large incident for feedback to occur. And at that point, it's way more costly and oftentimes too late.
Hey there. Welcome to the Process Masters podcast. I'm your fellow process workflows and automation enthusiast, Amelia, and it's great to have you here with us today because today is a special day. Today we're having this amazing guest with us. He's Gerry Abbey. Gerry is head of marketing at Copia Automation, and they are the team behind industrial DevOps and ICLM, industrial code life cycle management. Copia brings Git-based version control, automated backup and recovery, and collaborative change management into the OT world. Gerry also led major industry research like the state of smart manufacturing and state of industrial DevOps. At FabTech, this huge conference in Chicago, Gerry spoke on moving from reactive to proactive with disaster recovery and business continuity. What you learn from this half an hour or so is a 30-day business continuity disaster recovery checklist for plants, how to set up auto backups and Git version control for programmable logic controllers or PLC robot code in plain steps, and a 3-vendor question that you can use to cut hype and to buy with confidence. So, Gerry, thank you so much for being here with us today. And what I want to know from you is that, well, industrial DevOps, it used to be such a great thing, a great hype as it is right now. And I believe it's not a hype, it's a need. So can you walk us through what changed over the last few years that made industrial DevOps such a need as it is today?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me here today, Amelia. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And this is a great spot to start into. Because industrial DevOps is, at least it was a year and a half ago when I came into Copia, an unfamiliar term to many in the industry, and it probably still is for some. So when I came in to ground myself, I looked back at the history of DevOps. DevOps started in IT in 2009, and it gained mainstream traction within 7 years. Within 7 years, Gartner and Forrester were reporting about it, and there was a magic quadrant built around it. And however you feel about those industry analysts and their competitive quadrant reports, when they come out, most people know about something, and that's what I think about when I see that. And then carrying it over, so seeing that 7-year timeline, seeing where we are today with DevOps, that I think 90% of IT teams that are working on code are using that today. And that's because it drives efficiency and collaboration and the many things that you talked about in the introduction. Bringing industrial DevOps is bringing those same things to the industrial space, modified for the cyber physical mix. So we have networking implants, we have a lot of industrial code, devices, IoT, IIoT, and then we have all of these machines that are running automation, making all the stuff, distributing packages. And when you change code, the machine does something different, and that has real world implications. So this industrial and code DevOps takes into account the real world changes that are implemented to ensure safety. So that's a quick leveling of what the difference is. And then going back to that 7-year adoption, Copia came out 5 years ago. That's when we were founded. people were writing about industrial DevOps a little bit before that. And we're really seeing it take hold at this 5-year mark where there are solutions available. And in the research that I've done, I know we'll dig into that more, but last year when I ran the report, 10% of organizations had adopted industrial DevOps at scale. And where they had started was with the IT solutions and then migrated over to industrial DevOps, seeing the limitations there. But they're early adopters, the first movers are going to grab onto something that can increase productivity and make their teams faster, better, and more collaborative.
So
So,
what you're saying, let me unpack a little bit of all of the information that you just gave us. It is a 7-year-old industry, we can say. It's a segment that is been around for a few years, but the majority of industries and the plants, they are not yet prepared with a DevOps plan. Is that correct to say?
well, that was the next point. So this year we have 20% that responded that they've adopted at scale across the
Oh,
enterprise.
wow.
And 92% of the respondents said that they would have industrial DevOps by in the next 11 months. And I know it's a lot of stats, but
Yeah.
53% of all respondents either have adopted a solution and are rolling it out at scale or are actively piloting. So the majority of our respondents are in it with industrial DevOps, making it their everyday use application for teams.
That's great. And that's fast, isn't it? The adoption is so fast. Is that a reason why, Jerry? Is that, every plant should be prepared for disaster recovery, business continuity. It is a need indeed. But my question remains, why now? What happened that made us think about this topic and made so many plant leaders think about it as well and decide on having a plan, on changing the prospect of something happening that is outside of their control?
That's a great question. And that's why I dig deep into the history of everything so that I can try and look for trends. And I really think we're reaching that inflection point. DevOps reached that critical mass adoption after 7 years. Copia was founded 5 years ago. We're hitting that inflection point of more and more people knowing about it, more and more people using it, and then telling peers. And besides that, like word of mouth and education, also the practical use case applications, people are sharing those. We have more and more case studies all the time. When you have that validation, it makes such a difference. And then the last part, people are recognizing the fit of industrial DevOps. And really, it's where we started talking about that ICLM, industrial code lifecycle management that you introduced at the top. That we have lifecycle management for so many other things. And industrial code is one of the most, if not the most critical asset for running automation. And if that is not backed up, if that is not treated with the right processes around it, your automation can end up in a very bad state. So for improving, for gaining a competitive edge, and just for sustaining if there were a ransomware attack or a weather event, thinking about the fires, your hurricanes, flooding, there's so many different things that are happening that trigger downtime in an organization that cause real pain. And for all of those reasons, I think it's really putting that inflection point to the front.
Definitely. Yeah. You know what I think? Many leaders were so concerned with top, revenue and top lines. And many times we may forgo what really matters for the business. And DevOps is definitely a bottom line issue. If you don't think about it, or if you don't prepare, you can definitely have all of these problems that you just described, and they are um, so present right now. So let's think of that leader, that plan leader who hasn't yet or is about to think on a plan. So they are starting things. Give me a picture of a healthy setup for someone who hasn't done it yet. For example, that might be for sure the cause of many listening to us today. If I start from USB sticks and ad hoc saves, where should I go?
Yeah, I think the best way is if I start with the pain, and that's the last thing you said there. A lot of organizations are backing up their industrial code with those USB sticks or walking around with a laptop, plugging it in device after device to back up and to modify the code and deploy new code. And when you're doing that, maybe 20 years ago, it was fine. When we were first starting to network the plants and there were only a few devices, but those devices have been doubling every 5 years for the last 20. And another point in why this is being adopted and people are thinking about it now is that there's too many devices to manually manage. And that's the real pain, trying to have your workforce go from device to device to manage them, to change the code, and that it's also not centralized. So that lack of centralization causes pain, especially if you need to revert to the last working version of the code. Where was it saved? Who saved it? Did they save it? Is it um, saved by a date name and then final at the end and then final and then final and which one of those finals is the right one?
Yeah.
And and I know it sounds funny, but we've talked to so many people and that is their day-to-day experience.
Yeah, I believe you.
And
I come from the software world, so we definitely understand that. And we have understood that for a while now. But I understand that for plants and manufacturers, it's not the same. Or there is an awakening at the moment, right, for this reality and the need for productivity in that side.
totally. And then we're seeing more regulations come in too. So if you're operating in Europe, the NIS2 regulations are demanding clarity for industrial code in terms of who is accessing it, who is changing the code, is the code backed up, because they're looking at that as a critical recovery piece so that if you're hit by a ransomware attack or other hardware failure, human error, whether that you can recover. So going back to your question, now that we've painted this picture of pain and these reasons for adherence to regulations and de-risking your organization, what good looks like is having a system in place where you can pull your industrial code from the proprietary vendors and file types. So if you have a Rockwell PLC system in place, if you have Siemens, Snyder, Beckhoff, all the different ones out there, being able to pull them into one place, a solution like Copia, and work on them. And your distributed teams can work on them and they can see the different versions of the code. And plants that might be running the same exact automation setup can see, oh, you know what? At that plant, they're able to have a higher capacity, a faster throw rate. Could we compare what's going on in the code and adapt how those machines, our machines are running to mimic that? So you have this ability to share because of the centralization. And then at the end of the day, while I would say a lot of people hear this and say, well, that's a nice to have, but operationally, I don't know that we can take the time to do this. On the time piece, you can do it pretty quickly. But if that's your reaction, let's talk about the tangible pain and adherence to regulations. Backing up your code, you need a centralized system to do that, and Copia offers that. And solutions that have industrial DevOps, they offer that because they think about the need And that's just the next phase. And we're in it for manufacturing and distribution now because you have asset discovery systems like Dragos and Zomi, Clarity out there. And the next phase, now that you know what assets are there, is knowing that they are backed up and knowing that you can recover because you have those backups.
That's interesting. I think many people might think, well, in my case, it won't be as possible because I have this multi vendor situation, I have offline cells. How do you handle that?
Well, if you're completely offline, that makes it a lot harder. We're a cloud-based system, but with heavy rigor around data, keeping the data encoded, and completely protected so that we can work with organizations because we understand that your operational technology space needs to be secure. And we look at ourselves as offering and bringing that OT cyber resilience to protect an organization. And then the next part of your question, I'm sorry, Amelia.
No, no problem. I was just, you mentioned the multi vendor situation where if you have machines by this or that vendor, and I think that's the most part, that's the reality of many plants. How do you handle that? How do you come up with one single source of truth? And in the offline cases, you just touched on that as well.
Yeah. So the being single source truth took years of really deep technical work from our engineering team to develop the ability to tap into those systems and a lot of partnerships as well. One of the things that I focus on all the time is thinking about how can I work with in a technology ecosystem to help bring benefits from all sides. Because at the end of the day, we want to bring the best benefits and resilience to organizations. And if that's just us or it's us plus one company or many other companies, that's what we're looking for. We all need to work together. This industry is changing so fast because technology is advancing so quickly. And we want to be at the forefront of it. And we want to make sure all the organizations out there are as well.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that you can do that pretty quickly. So, my question is, what would the first 30-day look like if I'm coming up with a plan, a backup plan? I want to centralize all of the data, all of the code that I have in my plant. What is the checklist? I think that's the question here for the first 30 day.
Oh, that's a great question. I love digging into this one. So the first thing you're going to want to do is have an asset inventory. So if you have a system like Clarity, Dragos, and Zomi, and the others out there, you already have the starting point, which is great. And then if you bring Copia in on top of that, you can identify all those assets, load them up, and back them up. So step one is identifying your assets, whether you have a solution to do that or you're doing it in-house through a spreadsheet. At the end of the day, you just want an asset inventory. Then step two, coming in, load, and I know Copia best because this is where I work. You can download Copia in a day and start working on the code and building repositories. We have had deployments in a day for backing up an entire plant. If you have your assets identified, you bring us in, you can back everything up within a day.
Wow.
We recently did 34 plants in the span of a month, all backed up. That was a more unique case because there was a system integrator involved that was deeply familiar with both Copia and the end user who brought us in for those 34 plants. But still, this is just an example of how quickly you can do it. And in those 30 days, even if you're an enterprise, putting the right teams in place, you can do this super fast. And the payoff in de-risking your operations, and we haven't talked about OT cybersecurity, but I've talked to a lot of insurance providers looking for how are you thinking about ensuring these organizations. And one of the things that they've been talking about and digging into more and more is having those backups, knowing that the organization can recover. And that can lower what you're already paying and also make sure that you are insurable.
That's amazing. And you touched on a subject that I want to learn more about it. So, talking about insurance, what is the KPI, or what is the scenery that the insurer really wants to see in that case?
They would have to speak to that the most. I want to be clear on that. I'm not an insurance expert. I have been talking to them to gain a deeper understanding. And I think at the end of the day, what I hear the most is that these organizations are thinking about how they'll recover. And they're developing incident recovery plans because, to be honest, an incident's going to happen and you need a plan to recover. And on top of that, there's other metrics, RTO and RPO, recovery point objective, recovery time objective, knowing how long it will take you to recover. So running tabletop exercises to see how quickly you can recover, if there are any gaps, helping people understand the responsibilities in an incident. There's so many different pieces, but the starting point of this line of questions, thinking about that 30-day plan, just making sure that you're equipped to then move on to test your incident response plan. And that starting point is your knowing your network, knowing your assets, and knowing that they're backed up.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. How indeed quick you mentioned you can do it in a day. That's exciting. And how about, because it's one thing to back it up, it's another thing to keep it back it up, to keep the backup live and updated, right? So how do you place like a maybe a workflow layer, so reviews, exceptions, audit, things are clear for both OT and IT?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So I'm going to focus on OT and then I'll move into IT. But for OT, once you set these backups, you can put them on schedules or you can do them on demand, but they're churning and they're backing up. And then you also get change detection notifications. So if a file is backed up, you know if it's changed or if it's synced. And then we also recently implemented AI into this process so that you're getting natural language descriptions if there's a change, all the different changes that have happened, so that you can quickly identify, oh, this is normal, or oh, might be something off there. Let's look at that one. But every time we're thinking about bringing AI into the product, we sense check it with our customers over in alpha and the beta testing and many months, make sure it's going to add value. And that seems to be adding a ton of value in time savings so that you're not like, oh, something got modified. When I go into the system, I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to look at it. It's instantly there with that AI add-on. And
That's
then
amazing. So there is an AI agent that can actually take things from, like, perhaps pre-fill a change or something like that. You can involve AI and have it like quick fixes
well, it's not taking action. It's just describing what the change is.
and
We're
showcasing.
also still walking a fine line with protecting the operational technology space and moving towards action eventually. But right now, we don't want it to be taking action because of the repercussions if it were to cause a problem.
So there is a human in the process, but the process we can speed it up by having the AI agent showcasing what needs to be updated.
Keeping the human in the loop
Yeah.
and taking the right steps to your earlier point about change management, bringing people along in the right way.
It makes a lot of sense. So, well, walk us through a little bit more a tabletop. What roles in that case? What scripts? What success metrics should we follow in that setup?
Yes. So starting with the tabletop exercise, just making sure you're running them. You're understanding your incident response plan. You're looking at where files are saved, and you have clearly defined roles for what people are taking what action in the event of an incident. And then once you're working through that and have those things identified, looking at your recovery point objective, your recovery time objective, how quickly can you recover? And then looking for gaps throughout this process of unassigned roles or confusion on responsibilities, because there's always going to be some of that, especially when you think about when is this response plan getting implemented? Is it on third shift? Is it on first shift? Is it on Wednesday? Is it on a Sunday? It's not just one team that needs to run these, it's across your organization so that you're prepped and ready. And it's something that you should be running all the time, on a regular basis, because you're going to have turnover in roles, you're going to have changes. There's all sorts of different pieces to account for to make sure that you're always ready.
So it's an ongoing process, and it should definitely fit on the calendar of leaders and managers to keep educating the team on the plan.
100%. And build confidence, just that everyone feels confident. Because when something goes wrong, it's fight or flight. But if you build that muscle memory of how we respond, it lets the brain take a minute, lets everybody take a breath, and they already know what to do.
Wow, that is so different from not having that plan, right? And for sure, the outcome changes as well. And yeah, how fast you can recover and all of that. So, Gerry, can you share a case study with us? A situation where it used to be like this and now it's much better, and walk us through what changed and metrics and all.
Oh, such a great question. So the best recent example I've had is that 34 plant, um, back up within a month. That was wild to get that out there. In terms of actual incidents, I haven't really seen any, because once teams have implemented industrial DevOps or treating their code like a critical asset, they they have the right processes, people, systems operating, and I haven't really seen any incidents. Um, Amazon uses us. I think we're moving towards 50 locations, thousands of devices, and they look at the 80% reduction in downtime related to industrial code because they have the right systems and processes in place now, and the visibility and control. Um, yeah, those are a couple of the examples. Most of the examples I can just talk about in that same vein. But in terms of actual incidents, I haven't heard of any, which is great. I'm sure
Wow.
they'll happen. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that is great. So, people listening to us and wanting to have a scenario like that, like 80% time recovery, right? In terms of downtime. So, that sounds dreamy. How can I get there? And I'm sure people might be asking, so should I look for a vendor? And what questions should I ask when I'm searching for an ICLM or backup or versioning vendor? Maybe the top 3 that comes to mind.
so so the number one thing to look for when working with any vendor is intellectual honesty. When you're asking a question, that they are giving you a straightforward answer, and admitting that maybe they don't know something or they can't do something, because nobody can do everything. Nobody knows everything. And I look for that all the time in different interactions. So in terms of questions, I think making sure that you group up with your teams and identify the outcomes that you want to drive. And then related to that, what questions you need to ask to get at those outcomes. And technical fit is a huge starter, which you'll get by grouping up in teams and asking, because you might have an all one type of PLC house or one type of HMI, and the vendor that you're talking to might not necessarily be able to manage that code or back it up. So thinking about technical fit, sort of think about the honesty and candor that a vendor brings to the table, the technical knowledge and willingness to dig in and make sure that the technical fit is right, because at the end of the day, that's going to add the most value. And then the last group of questions, I would think about change management and how you're going to work together to get people on board and how quickly that's going to happen. And then also be able to provide proof and customer referrals that can attest to them.
Yeah, I'm thinking here that you also have to convince probably your finance department, your CFO. So, how do you clear ROI for these guys?
That's one of the hardest things because we're looking so intensely at mitigating the risk. And a lot of times when it's not an active fire, it's like, oh, it'd be really nice to have fire insurance, but we don't have fires that often. So why do we need it? And then you have a fire and you're like, oh my God, we should have gotten that fire insurance. Now we're in a lot of trouble. So in terms of ROI for that case, it can be difficult, but do you have homeowners insurance? Do you have car insurance? Well, you should probably have an industrial code lifecycle management in place because you're going to need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a matter. Again, it's not a top line one. It's definitely a bottom line one, and we all should be looking at it. So, Gerry, you shared a little bit, a glimpse with us on a few stats that come from the newest State of Industrial DevOps report and the research that you did. I'm curious if you have more of these nuggets to share with us. More of your
100%.
findings.
And going back to your last question,
Yeah.
one of the reasons that we do this report is to help understand that ROI. So a lot of numbers are going to be crunched internally for organizations. So one of the biggest questions we ask in this report is downtime numbers. And the downtime per hour numbers in this report are vast. The average was 3.6 million per hour. And one of the biggest takeaways for me is that there was a big disparity between C-suite and everyone else year over year. And while this is only our second report, and this is something that I want to continue to dig into year over year over year and onward, that disparity from what I've been able to unpack is C-suite having a wider view of downtime. So it's not just a line shutting down, but the cascading impact across your supply chain. You could have to bring lawyers in if there was a safety incident, safety response personnel. You could have bring in your insurance to look at and see if you can get a reimbursement for that amount of downtime, especially if you're running at 3.6 million per hour as a cost of downtime. So that's one piece that I'm really focusing on and try to continue to unpack. And then we ask about what's causing downtime. So for all downtime, planned and unplanned, 45% of that is attributed to industrial code. And then we asked about unplanned downtime. And year over year, cybersecurity incidents, breach, remediation is the number one result. And after that, hardware and software industrial coding issues. And when you have a downtime incident, these operations, the automation can be very complex. So it could be a cybersecurity, somebody's trying to breach your system, but they haven't, but you see it. And then someone makes a mistake. So you have human error coming into the loop. And then you have a machine break because it's running at the wrong speed because somebody made a mistake and they ran it too fast. The reason they were able to run it too fast is because they modified the industrial code on it, but they didn't tell anybody and you didn't have any tracking mechanism and you had no visibility into it. There's these interwoven pieces, but that high cost of downtime and that high attribution to industrial code is are probably the two biggest things that I take away from this report. And if you have other questions about it, I can talk about it all day.
Yeah. That's incredible how prominent it sounds when you put it like that and you show the data and the reasons why unplanned downtime is connected to code. And it makes a lot of sense since technology, as you said earlier, is here to stay, and not only to stay, but is digging it deeper and deeper into the results and the efficiency and the productivity of plants everywhere and all types of manufacturing industries. So it is something to look at. That's clear. And if someone already has, so they're listening to us, they're okay, I'm there, I created a plan, I have it in place. How do I make it better? How do I improve it over time? You mentioned educating your team, you mentioned all of these ongoing processes, but is there something that we haven't touched yet, something that you would recommend for plant managers, plant leaders?
Well, communicating as much as possible and supporting your teams, having stand-ups and just asking what's working, what's not, fostering an environment where people feel safe to give feedback, and creating mechanisms for feedback. When you operate in an environment that is feedback driven, you're constantly going to be surfacing small things that you can tweak for improvement. When you're not operating in a feedback safety environment, it often takes a large incident for feedback to occur. And at that point, it's way more costly and oftentimes too late.
Wow. With that message, I really want to talk to you here, listening to us, and invite you to run and pick one line, one cell, and run Gerry's 30-day disaster recovery business continuity checklist, and then tell us about it. I'm sure it can be transformative to your plant, to your manufacturing, and maybe multiple plants that you're running without that plan. Well, that's a lot of risk to take. So hopefully, Gerry, many leaders here today will appreciate your ideas, appreciate your checklist and all of the information you shared, and will transform their backup plans, all of their the way they look at code and DevOps into their plans. So, Gerry, how can people follow your work, learn more from you? Can you share maybe your social media, your contacts?
Absolutely. You can find me, Gerry Abbey, on LinkedIn and Copia.io. You can see updates from Copia. And yeah, those would probably be the two best places to find me.
If people want to download your reports, they can go directly to Copia's website and have them there for free. Is that correct?
Yes, right on the homepage, you'll see an icon of the report and you can click through the download.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much again for being here with us, for joining us, Gerry, and sharing all of your knowledge, all of your findings in your research. And yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully, we'll see each other soon in another great conference like FabTech or another. And yeah, it was really, really kind of you to be here with us and sharing all of your knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amelia. And thank you for the great questions. Great questions are such a pleasure to take part in.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. And I'll see you soon on our next Process Masters podcast.